Greetings and salutations. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do an in-place upgrade of Linux Mint from version 17.3 to 19.1, retaining all of your user data. Now, the method that I'm going to show you is assuming that when you installed Linux Mint 17.3, you weren't hip enough to create a separate home partition to make upgrading like this really easy. That method is very well documented. What we're looking at today is how to do it if you weren't hip enough to have a separate home partition and you've got one big happy partition that's got your system and your personal data files all in the same place, and you want to know how to do this. A lot of people have asked me how to do this, so I'm going to show you. But I am going to warn you, I don't know whether this is going to work for everybody on everybody's machine. So therefore, proceed at your own risk and do make sure that you do a complete backup of all of your personal data before you attempt to do this, because if you run into a situation where you have to reinstall completely from scratch and wipe the disk, you don't want to lose all that personal data. You need it backed up somewhere so you can restore it some way, somehow. So we have Linux Mint 17.3 Rosa running right now. And why we're doing this is because in about 2 months, this is going to go bye-bye. It is no longer going to be supported because its base, Ubuntu 14.04, is going to be retired. And what's going to happen is that it will no longer get support. The repositories that it gets its updates from and all the software you install are just going to quit working. And if anybody comes along and tells you that, oh, you can switch the repositories over to the archives, which you can do, and keep the system running, please don't do that. As a matter of fact, if anybody puts in the comments and says, oh, you can do that, it'll be okay, I will probably delete it because it's extremely dangerous. What keeps Linux safe, and the reason why you don't need to have antivirus on your machine, is the fact that vulnerabilities are usually patched as soon as they are discovered. As a matter of fact, in only the last 3 weeks, there have been numerous vulnerabilities that have been discovered and patched even before they were announced. And as long as you did all of your updates when you were supposed to, you were safe from those even before you heard of them. So if you can imagine, if you're running a system that's not getting updates, as time goes on, it gets more and more dangerous. So that's why we're doing this. You really do need to upgrade. So we're on Linux Mint 17.3, and what we want to do is take a look around here real quick, because I've kind of set some things up so we can make sure that it's going to do what we want it to do. If I open up the file manager, let's see, let's click it again. There we go. Being slow. There we go. I finally got it to work. You notice we have a bin directory here. And in that bin directory, I have created a little script called hello. So this is going to stand in for our personal data that we have in our home directory to make sure that it carries over and we don't lose it. Also, what I have done is I have created an avatar. So we can go ahead and pull up the settings for that, and then we can take a look and go down here to users and groups. That's usually down here on the bottom. It's usually the last thing, and it sure is. I've also increased the font size. Password there. Open this up. You notice that I have made the little teacup or coffee cup my avatar there. So those are personal changes that I've made to the system, and we're going to see if that carries over. If you have a system with multiple users, I need to go ahead and get this out of the way up front. What you need to do is you need to figure out, before you proceed, in what order those user accounts were created, because you will need to recreate them in the same order, and you will need to make sure that you use exactly the passwords that you assigned to them originally. So it has to be the original username and it has to be the original password. If you get any of that wrong when you go to boot up after you upgrade, it's not going to be right because the user number is going to be wrong. If the username's wrong, it's not going to find it in the home directory when it does the upgrade. It's going to cause all kinds of weirdness to happen. So what you can do is you can look at a file on your system, and what it will tell you is about your users when they were created. So let's say that you have your own user account, and then you have Bob and Jill and Cindy, and they all have accounts on your system as well. You need to look at the order in which they were created, and you can do that by looking at the password file. So we'll use nano to take a look at etc password. Now, this looks like gobbledygook, but it's actually all of the user accounts that are created on your system. Most of them are system accounts. In other words, they're used by the system or programs that run on the system. Well, what we want to do is go all the way down to the bottom of the account here, and you see that we have my account there, which is Joe, and it's Joe Collins, and then it says where my home directory is, and then it tells me that I'm using bash out of bin. And the main thing that we're looking for here is this user number. This tells me the order. So if I create another user, it'll be 1001, 1002, 1003. Write these down so that you know what order you're going in. If you have a system that has like 5 or 6 users on it, and some people do, then maybe this would not be the best method for you because you might get lost. You want to back things up and then restore them one at a time. Anytime you have multiple users on a system, stuff like this gets hairy, but it's entirely up to you. You do whatever you want to do with it. I'm just making you aware. So make sure that you look at this file and that you write down the users in the order. And remember that the actual users on an Ubuntu-based system, it will start at 1,000. So those are real accounts, okay? Everything else on the system is going to have a number below 1,000 if it's a user that is generated by a program or some system service. So let's go ahead and get out of that because we're done with that. And we are going to go ahead and power this off. And we have to use sudo because this doesn't run systemd. It runs upstart. For it's a NIT system. We will be moving to a systemd system. So we'll go ahead and close this thing up. It'll take it a couple of seconds to get itself together and close it down. Remember, we are running in a virtual machine. It has been running faster for me since I have upgraded to VirtualBox 6.0.4, but it's still slower than I want it to be, especially on Linux Mint. So we're going to make an assumption now that what we've done is you guys, you've done all your backups and you're ready to boot the machine off of your 19.1 media, whether that be a USB stick or maybe you got an old machine and you're going total old school, so you are actually going to use a DVD. Whatever it is, we're going to boot it up and we're going to take a look around, and the boot process takes a little while, so we're going to jump to where we get to the desktop. Alright, we are on Linux Mint 19. It's saying that it is rendering in software mode because we have no drivers installed. We're not going to worry about that. And what we need to do now is just make sure that everything is working the way it should with Linux Mint 19.1 on your computer. Make sure that you've got drivers for your Wi-Fi if you need them. Make sure that your video is working properly. You have the proprietary video drivers available to you. If you are running a Core Duo machine either from Dell or HP, you may run into a bug where the machine is very, very slow, and then you look and you see that the CPU is running at 100%. That is a bug with Ubuntu 18.04 that I'm not sure is fixed yet, and in that case, you may want to not use 19.1 but go to 18.3. That's what I'm doing on my Linux Mint Core Duo machine. I'm just sticking with 18.3 because they haven't fixed the problem yet. Though, let's assume that everything works. One thing I do want to do is jump in here, and I want to make our fonts bigger so it's easier for everybody to see. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's another thing I had done with the the 17 0.3 machine is I had the fonts cranked up on that one as well, and we'll see if that setting goes over when we install. So go ahead and open up the installer. And the Ubiquiti installer has never been known for being the fastest in the Linux world, so give it a time to get itself together, get itself all opened up here. On the first page, it's going to ask for a language, and English is what we speak around here, so we'll roll with that. Okay, next step, keyboard layout. We're going to go with English US. That works fine for me. If you want to do something else there, you go right ahead. Yes, we want to install all of the codecs so that we can play video and audio files and certain things off the internet. Very important that you check that box. You can go back and get it later under the welcome screen, but you probably want to get that out of the way right up front, so make sure that's checked. Now, at this point, you may notice that the Ubiquiti installer here is taking its sweet time. What it is doing is it's scanning your system. It's looking for all of the hardware and the drives and trying to figure out where it's supposed to install and what drive it's going to use and all that stuff. So this can take a little time, especially on older, slower systems or in virtual machines like we are here today. And this is why I'm talking to fill the time that it's taking for the system to figure out where things are. So once you get to this page, you notice you do not get an upgrade option anywhere. You can install alongside, which is creating a dual boot. You don't want to do that. You don't want to erase the disk and install because that starts from scratch. So go down to something else. We will continue. And here we're going to see the layout of the first disk in the machine. So we're assuming now that you have one hard drive in the machine and you have one partition right there that's got Linux Mint on it plus all of your personal files. The way Linux Mint 17.3 automatically sets things up is it creates a big partition starting at the front of the disk that's got the system and all the files in it, and then at the end it creates a logical partition and then puts your swap partition in there. Now, if you have a UEFI system, it might look a little bit different, but for what we're doing here, it's pretty much the same. Just follow along, and hopefully it'll work the way it's supposed to. I'm not really sure. I haven't tested it on UEFI, but actually it should work. So what we need to do is we need to assign the partitions again to the new system we're going to install, but we do not want to format this partition. So to do that, just double-click on it. And right now it's set to do not use this partition. We want to choose ext4 because that's the default file system. And we want to mount this partition at root, which is the slash, but do not click format. If you click format now and then you continue forward, what's going to happen is that it's going to erase the drive and it's going to start from scratch. And that will defeat the purpose of what I'm trying to show you how to do. So go ahead and click that. Then down here on your swap partition, you want to double click that as well. Wait a second, this might need to get itself together before we move on. Yep, I was afraid it would do that. Sometimes it's going to give you this message. Just go back. Don't even pay any attention to it. Just go back. It's all right. Because that has already been set. Okay. It came up and now it's saying that it's mounted at the root. And we want to use this for swap. So let's continue. Make sure that your bootloader is being installed where it should be, and it should be on SDA, which is the first drive. Okay, it's going to tell us what it's doing. It's going to preserve the data in the home directory, but it's going to replace the operating system in place, which is exactly what we want it to do. And yes, it's okay to format the swap partition, but if it comes up and it says that it's trying to format the root partition there, back up and make sure that you've turned the format off on that. Now, the install from this point on goes on pretty much the way it always does. So you choose your time zone. And then when you get to the place where you create your user, you really need to make sure that your username, password, all the information matches up to what you had on the old machine for your first account here. So this would be the first account that you created. The administrator account is what we're creating here. So I'm going to put my name in. It has chosen Joe for the username, which is the same as it was before. I'm pretty sure that I called it LM test VM. Yeah, but it wasn't an underscore. Now, the reason why you want to make sure that your computer name matches up, if you named your computer Betsy before, name it Betsy again, is because some of the programs that you use may be using that as a way to keep up like a sync service or something like that, to know what machine it's working on. So if you change your machine from Betsy to George, then you got a problem. All right, and let's get the second one in there, my super secret, super safe password. Make sure that's pretty much the same too. They match, that's good, move on. And from this point forward, the install is pretty much as it is normally. I have noticed in my experimentations while doing this, getting ready for this video, that it does tend to run a little bit slower. So be patient, give it some time. We'll come back when it's time to reboot into the newly installed system. Okay, it has installed and we are ready to reboot and rock down the highway. And I am going to go ahead and reboot the system, and we will come back when we are ready to log in, because it takes a little while to reboot. Be sure to remove your installation media. Okay, we have rebooted successfully, and it is time to log in for the first time. And it'll probably take it about 30 or 40 seconds to load the Cinnamon desktop. Just usually does after the first boot. It just takes forever. So we're just going to sit here and chat a little while and wait for the system to do this. One of the things that you have to keep in mind is that if you are jumping from Linux Mint 17.3 to Linux Mint 19.1, a lot of water has gone under the bridge. There are changes in the system. So let me give you a for instance, all right? If you're using Linux Mint 17.3 and you have set up your music to run with Banshee, then you're going to have to install Banshee to use Banshee again, because one of the things that's changed between 17.3 and 19.1 is the fact that we now use Rhythmbox in Linux Mint for the default music player. The reason why it came up in software rendering mode, we do not have any drivers installed just yet, but we don't need those right now. So what you would do at this point would be to open up the update manager down here and get your system all up to date. And we're going to assume that you just went ahead and did that. I want to show you a couple of tweaks. First thing we want to look at for sure is whether our bin directory came over, because that's what's telling us that the system kept our personal files. Yes, it is there, so that is good. Let us jump into settings real quick here and see if our avatar for our user is the same. It should be. Go to users and groups. Let's do this again, B. Make sure it all gets in there before I hit enter. Without the drivers installed, the keyboard lags and it doesn't take the password the way it ought to. Ran into this problem on take 1 of this video, but we will try it again, ladies and gentlemen. There we go, we're finally here. Now you see I have a teacup. That's all I wanted to show. Gee, all that stuff for that. So, let us jump in and look at some other issues that we might have to run in, we have to fix. Once you get your updates all installed and you've rebooted your system, then one of the things you definitely want to do with Linux Mint, and I show this every time that I show an install of Linux Mint, is that you want to open Synaptic Package Manager right here. Hopefully it'll take my password properly this time. Yes, it worked. I don't know why I was being such a pain before. I was typing the right thing. I knew it. Okay, so what you want to do is in Synaptic Package Manager, and just close that, is you want to go to Settings, and you want to open up Preferences right there, and you want to make sure that you have this checked where it says Consider Recommended Packages as Dependencies. That's important because some of the stuff that you're going to pull out of the Ubuntu repositories, you might load a program and find out that you don't got some features that are working, or just doesn't seem to be all there. That's because the developer has gotten confused between what a recommended package is and what an absolute dependency is. So that will go ahead and take care of that. Now, with some programs, yes, it's absolutely true. It pulls in a lot of extra stuff, but the program runs. So that's entirely up to you. If you want to struggle with figuring out why a program doesn't work or worry about a few extra packages installed on your system, that's okay. So we've already talked about the fact that you might need to install your music player if you have Banshee set up, because Banshee's not the stock player. So what we need to do here is open a terminal. There's a couple other things I want to show you very quickly. And we'll go ahead and make this terminal big so everybody can see. This may or may not work. When I was testing earlier, I got this to work about half the time. So what we want to see is whether our script works. Yeah, it actually does. A couple of times when I did that earlier, it didn't. And what the problem was is that the system is not seeing that you have a local bin directory, and it's not adding it to the path because it's not getting the command. One of the differences between Linux Mint 17.3 and Linux Mint 19.1 is that in Linux Mint 17.3, the system did not automatically create for the users a .bashrc file locally in their home directory. And so sometimes path statements, things like that, they don't seem to line up and work the way they're supposed to. The way to fix that problem is really quite simple. All we have to do is copy cp etc skell, that's short for skeleton. That's where when you're installing your stuff, when you're installing and setting up your account, the developers of the operating system put the files they want you to have in your home directory in there, and one of them is .bashrc. But you see, because we upgraded in place, this didn't copy. So we want to make sure it goes. And we're in our home directory right now, so we'll just use a period to stand for the current directory. That's perfectly all right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a period once again in a second way. This time around, it is a shorthand for the source command, which will cause the shell to reread the file we tell it to look at, which is bashrc, which we just copied over. So we want to load that and see what it looks like. Now we have a color prompt. So we're getting what the Linux Mint developers wanted us to have. And our path is going to be the same. Yep, so that works as well. So there you go, gang. That's how you do that. It's pretty simple. Your applications that you had installed outside of the ones that come with Linux Mint, they're not going to be here. But your settings are. So you only have to reinstall it. You don't have to reconfigure it. So like, for instance, if you use Google Chrome for a browser and you want to reinstall Google Chrome, no problem whatsoever. Just install it. All of your account information, your bookmarks, everything is still sitting on the system. You just have to install it, click on it, and then it'll start working. And that's true with any other software that you added to Linux Mint. So that's it. As usual, your feedback is always welcome. I hope this video was useful to you, and I hope it works for you. If it doesn't, you have my profound apologies. Just make sure that you back everything up before you attempt to do this particular procedure. Please check out EzeeLinux on the web, and also check out EzeeLinux on Facebook. and give us a like if you are a Facebook user. Also, check out EzeeTalk. This is a forum which is run by the Easy Linux project. It is not part of any other large organization. Your data is not being farmed out to somewhere else, and we have complete control over it, and it is a very well moderated environment. I haven't been too active in there myself lately because I've been busy with other things, but I do keep an eye on things and moderate, and we have 3 or 4 moderators that make sure that try and keep the spam out, try and keep the nasties down, and that sort of thing. So come join us. It's a lot of fun there. And I'm gone. Thank you for watching.